Welcome, everyone. We are here. Today's date is August 18, 2022. It's 1 p.m. We're at the 10 West State Street address for the City Council chambers of the City of Marshalltown. And we are called to order for a special meeting that's been posted. Now that we've been called to order, let's do the roll call.
Oop. Isom.
Seems
Here.
like not to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Laddyhoff.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
Thompson. Walker.
Here.
Very good. We got a quorum and a guest. So on the agenda is the franchise fee work session, which is what we're doing. Take it away.
All right, thank you. I'm Susan Parker. For those of you that might not remember, happy to be here this afternoon. We're going to work through at a high level an agenda that'll look like this. We're going to talk about some of the basics of the franchise fee. I'm going to give you all as council members an opportunity to spend a little bit of time in reflection with an initial reaction. Then we're going to have different members of the city staff share just project information, what it might mean. We're going to talk through that. And then at the end, we're going to have a red, yellow, green decision that I'm going to ask you for. And I'll explain a little bit more about that after we go through the franchise fee basics. So that's a little bit at a high level what it looks like. Please, if at any point in time we need to take a break, if things get going, please feel free to ask. We'll make sure that we pause as appropriate and take the break as needed. So with that, we're going to talk just about the basics of what a franchise fee is. Who in the state of Iowa might already have franchise fees in place, that type of a thing. You also have a handout that came from Alliant Energy that you have accessible to you as well, so please feel free to take a look at that as well. But the basics of a franchise fee, it applies to all of the consumers of the utility companies in Marshalltown. So for the city of Marshalltown, Alliant Energy, Consumers Energy, it would not apply to the city of Marshalltown itself. There is a code in place that explains it, and today there's about 209 communities in Iowa that have some kind of a franchise fee in place. And so I'm going to show you a map with some of the larger cities that are comparable to Marshalltown that already have a franchise fee in place. And so the percentages that you see on that, the first one would be for electric, the second one would be for your gas utilities. You might notice that a city like Ames is not on there. That's because their utilities are run and owned by the city itself. And so if you run and own your own electrical or gas, right, you can't do the franchise fee just by default. So that's what that looks like. So just some comparable, you get an idea for what the percentages are that are being used in those different portions in the state, or different portions, excuse me, in those cities in our state. All right, so again, the franchise fee then is collected by the utility company. So we would see that on our bills as consumers. We would get that, and the utility company just passes that along. And so from a utility company perspective, there is no gain on their part, right? They don't make any money from this franchise fee. It's all money then that's passed through to the city itself. With Alliant Energy and Consumers Energy, both of those utility companies would need to have franchise, I'm going to call them contracts. I don't think that's the correct term, but those franchise fee contracts, if you will, those terms in place in order for that to happen. You can see what a 1% estimate, that's the graph on the graph to your right on that, what that would look like in terms of where the majority of that, majority of the customer base, if you will, would be coming through. So today, and Jessica, I'm going to ask, I believe this is right. Today, there's already the right agreement in place with Alliant, but Consumers Energy, we would need to do some work with them in order to have the franchise agreement in place, just so that y'all know where we stand with both of those companies. All right, so again, everyone would pay, regardless of if you're nonprofit, all nonprofits, religious organizations, the school districts, everyone would be impacted, if you will, by the franchise fee, with the exception of the city of Marshalltown itself would not have to pay. And then that money that is collected could be spread over operations, capital projects, for those types of things. The code that exists in Iowa is pretty clear on what that money can and cannot be used for, and that's again what we're going to talk about here in a minute in terms of where the potential could be. It's interesting if you look up the the table to the right where you could see the impact estimates that are coming from both Alliant as well as from Consumers Energy in terms of what the impact of the cost would be to the consumers. Okay. All right. There are two ways then that this could happen. So in one way, or two ways, I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it, but as we talk about moving ahead, if we were to decide to move forward with the franchise fee, the council could issue a special election and that could be put out there. If we decided as a council not to do a special election, citizens could petition for a reverse referendum, and you can see what those requirements are underneath there. We're sharing that information, of course, with the council just so we know what the impact of the decisions are that we're making right as we move forward. So I'm going to pause there for a moment and ask first, are there any questions on any of what we have shared up to this point in terms of the basics of what a franchise fee is, what it means, who has it, those types of things?
So it would be at the council's direction whether we go on to hold an election or not, correct?
Correct. Correct. Yep. Okay. All right. With that really high-level flyover of what a franchise fee is, the information that is on the handout from Alliant Energy, what I would like for the council members to do at this point is I want you just to take a minute and think about initial reaction, your initial perception, what you think voters might say, what your concerns might be. What are the positives that might be out there? How might people react both positively and negatively? And I just want you to take a minute and jot down some of those notes on the papers in front of you. The reason for asking you to write down your initial perceptions is because as we move through the day and we gain more information, it'll be helpful to us to understand, are all of my questions getting answered by the information that's coming? Are there more? Because again, that's going to set us up for at the end of our time this afternoon to talk about the red, yellow, green decision, which again, I'll explain here more in a minute. So just take a few minutes and write down your initial reactions, again, concerns, what are positives, what's a perception you have. You could even write down questions that you might have. All right. What I would love, if you're willing, is to start with Gabe and have you share one of the positive things that came to mind and one of the concerns that came to mind. And again, it's just so that you guys can kind of hear from each other after this basic flyover that we've had, Where are we kind of sitting? So if you don't mind, one positive, one concern, and we'll zip around the table and then we'll give the next instructions.
I guess one positive, I guess depending on how we allocate the franchise fee, moves the needle in a little bit bigger direction than some of the current capital improvement funding that we have. I'm thinking streets specifically. We can't move the needle with what we have today, regardless, even if we throw an extra $1 million. This moves the needle significantly more to be able to address some areas of concern that we can't really touch or move in a direction that's significant. We've heard, at least from a few individuals, but everybody calls it fee a tax, even though that's not what it is or how it's defined at different levels. So there's your public opinion that we'll hear probably from here on out.
Thanks. Al.
I suppose the positive would be there would be money in the project or the budget to do some projects. I guess I don't totally understand. So you got an electric company paying a franchise fee, but they're collecting money from everybody to pay that fee. So the electric company don't care, but I don't know if that's the right word. Electric company don't care if what the number is or anything. If they're going to collect it to pay it, that doesn't maybe seem right.
Thanks.
For a positive, I think it's a fair way for all property owners to help with, especially our safety aspect of the city. We have in Marshalltown, we have a very large amount of non-taxable property. So I think that would have everybody in just a little bit, to help defray some of the costs of police, fire, all that type of thing, even street maintenance, that type of thing. As far as the negative goes, Marshalltown pays some of the highest rates in electric bills in the state of Iowa right now. So adding on to that, I can see that being pretty negative.
Thanks.
Show me the money, but, we have the lost, the local option sales tax, so we're trying to make up what the legislature keeps scaling back from us, and so we keep trying to figure out how to do that, whether it's to figure out what we do with the compost facility and have fees for that, or what do we charge there. This looks like one way to do it. And part of the positive for me was I moved here in 1986 from a town that had municipal-owned everything. So it had cable TV and Wi-Fi and like 124 cable channels back in 1986, and garbage hauling and water and sewer, everything. And it was cheap. And so we got down there and was like, holy cow, I'm getting billed by a different hauling company for the garbage, and the water's kind of high coming from that bill. And now I got a bill from Alliant Electric. And so I like the idea of having, one bill, one place. And I know that isn't the real goal here. The drawback will be 15% of the people out there won't like any change anyhow. And they add another 15% because they will smell tax, fee, franchise, something that, oh my God, I can't afford it, even if it's only $15 or $20 or $25 a year. And there probably are some people out there who can't. So that's the pushback I expect.
Thanks. Jeff.
Well, I'd say some of the benefits are, as stated earlier, the city certainly has the needs from an infrastructure standpoint, public safety standpoint. So there certainly is the need for those dollars. The downside, I'm all about economic development, and it does make us just incrementally that much less competitive unless the spending we can do can provide more value than the rate we'll collect.
Thanks. Dex.
Positive that hasn't been mentioned yet is the increase would give us a little bit greater strength around our planning efforts and planning for some things that we could carry across the finish line a little easier. Negative, inflation's real, and it causes all families to think pretty hard about things like this in the face of increased costs.
Thank you. So the reason that I had y'all write down initially positives and negatives is as we go through the next portion of the presentation, you're going to hear some different ways that a franchise fee might be able to benefit the city, right? So the various directors are going to share that information and projects. And I think it's always helpful to us to start that thinking from that place of what will the public say? What might be things that they say positively? What might be things they say negatively? And that should hopefully allow you to enter into conversation with people that are sharing. Because ultimately, at the end of our time, we're going to ask you for, I've mentioned this a couple times, we're going to ask you for a red, yellow, green decision. The red decision is, we know we do not want to move forward with the franchise fee. We're done talking about it. That's red. The green decision is, wow, after everything we've heard this afternoon, absolutely, let's move forward with the franchise fee decision. That's green. The yellow would be, I think we still need to get some more information. Let's get 3 council members to form a subcommittee. What's the additional information that we would need, the timeline we would want to collect it, and that's the path we want to go down. Okay, so again, as we move into this afternoon, I'd encourage you to keep that list in front of you, your initial perceptions. What did I think would be good about it? What did I think would be bad about it? Move those thoughts around as you hear information this afternoon. So if you get new information and you say, wow, maybe that doesn't really sound like a tax, we could actually frame it this way, go ahead and shift those in your columns, if you will, so that at the end you've got an idea from a data-driven perspective what the best way forward is with this conversation as a city council for the city of Marshalltown. Okay? All right, so with that, again, as we move into these following slides, we're going to talk about how a franchise fee could be used, what works with it. We know that there are 2 excluded uses, and so you can see those on this slide, the energy conservation measures for low-income homeowners, the property tax abatements. You can see that. Are there any questions on that before we, again, get into the fun part about the projects and what it might mean and hear from the directors? And again, in that part of it, I'm going to encourage you to ask questions and engage in the conversation so that at the end of our time, we're feeling confident in whether or not we can make a red, yellow, green decision. So any questions before we move into that on the franchise fee basics, what it means, how it plays together, what's excluded, who's excluded, any of that? Yes.
Can anyone enlighten me as why property tax abatements will be excluded?
Yeah, so it's property tax abatements only when a disaster as defined by Iowa code is basically called. And so it's not just property tax abatements in general. And so as we've been through 2 disasters that fit that definition, our property tax abatement programs didn't change. They're still being utilized. And so that's where we thought that this probably doesn't fit as a use that we would perhaps want to pursue because of the systems that we have in place already.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other questions before we get started? All right, hearing none. We're going to talk about local option sales tax first.
Good afternoon, Diana Steiner, Finance Director. Well, since people learn in different ways, I have a little demonstration for you that kind of outlines the relationship between local option sales tax and franchise tax. So this represents local option sales tax. This represents franchise tax. Currently we have none for utilities. So every year we get about $4.2 million in local option sales tax. And of that, a piece of it is coming from the 1% charge on utilities. So So if we implement a 1% franchise fee, we're gonna take $500,000 out of this revenue and put it in here. So this is for your commercial businesses and your residences. However, with a franchise fee, you can add a little bit more money because now we would be charging the governments, the nonprofits, and those type of organizations. So 1% on your utility bill, if you were to look at your utility bill today, you'd see the 1% local option sales tax on it. That would go away. You'd see a franchise fee at the same amount if you're at 1%. So if you had 2%, then you're going to gain more revenue here in your franchise fee. And 3% or 4%, 5%, and just keep growing. This would stay the same. We'd already have the 1% off for the utilities. So hopefully that kind of helps a little bit more, so your visualization. So again, customers cannot be charged both a franchise fee and a local option sales tax. If the city enacts the franchise fee, the loss goes away from that billing. The tax exempt entities do not pay loss on gas or electric now, but they would with a franchise fee. The franchise fee estimates that Alliant gave us would be around $513,000 a year. So again, with my demonstration, you saw how I moved the 1% from local option sales tax to the franchise fee. And then because these other organizations are now paying the franchise fee, we added a little bit more revenue. So to put this in numbers, if you like to see graphs, was there a question?
I got a quick question for you. That's
Okay.
513 net, or that's gross? Because you just took some off of lost, right? So is that net or
Yeah,
gross?
there's, Alliant doesn't have any way to break it out for us, so they're saying with all the other governments and nonprofits paying, it's $513,000.
What we get, so that doesn't take into consideration of what we lost out of lost.
So,
Because you're taking some off the top, right? So that's,
yeah, so the amount
Because some
from
of that's already-
lost
yeah.
would be less than 513,000 for the portion of the nonprofits and others that don't currently pay the loss. But the 513,000 is what that 1% looks like on all of the energy used in
so
Marshalltown.
this is gross, so this isn't true representation of a net increase in what we're getting today through the 1% loss. So that's my point.
Yeah, we don't know, I mean, maybe, just for example, it could be that the local option sales tax is only $500,000, and the franchise fee would be $513,000, so you gain $13,000.
That's my point, right?
We don't
So this
know
is
what that amount is.
This number's misleading in my opinion, so I just wanted to make sure I asked that question because we're not, that franchise fee of 1% isn't getting 513. Because you're taking some out of lost already, right? So that number's not real. I get it's real, but it's not real as comparatively to what's on the table already today.
May I say, I think, I just want to, what you're saying is, Gabe, I just want to make sure is that it doesn't represent the additional.
Correct,
It represents what it would be
correct,
because it's a replacement,
correct.
right?
Yes.
So it's a 513,000 is real money that would come into the city of Marshalltown to replace
But
some
not all of
number
it's
that-
new money.
Correct, not all of
Yes.
it's new money. Just make sure we're all understanding when we say it's not representative. I want to make sure that that's clear. It's not a gap statement. It's a, this is what it would be statement. Yeah, okay.
So this is just outlining the actual revenues. So we budgeted $4.2 million for local option sales tax. So you can see by the bar on the bottom that with no franchise fee, we're at $4.2 million. If you go up to 1%, overall, the amount is still $4.2 million, but you've gained the 1% from the franchise fee, which reduces your local option sales tax by the same amount. And then the 2%, it just keeps growing. You can see that growth. So you must state in the revenue purpose statement what property tax relief will be used. So, as you recall, our local option sales tax, when we get it in, we split it. 78% goes to property tax relief, and the other 22% goes towards council designated. So if it's sitting over in the franchise fee, we don't have to do that split anymore. And so we could actually increase that and use the whole $113,000 for property tax relief. So that would reduce our tax levy for a $100,000 taxable house by 12 cents per thousand.
Just to point out there, something that Councilmember Isom brought up, we use that 513,000 as a basis number for these calculations as well. Just recognizing that there certainly is some amount in local option sales tax that we are not collecting right now. This was the number we had to work with, so that's kind of what we based things off of. We didn't get the consumer's energy information, which was, less significant, about 13,000 a year until just yesterday. And so we decided just to stick with the Alliant scenario and not pull in the consumer's energy, knowing that was the significantly lesser of the two.
So staff are recommending that we account for that difference if you're changing from local option sales tax with the split of 78% property tax relief and the 22% council designated, that we account for that when you move it to a franchise fee. So we want to at least have that same amount. And if we use the whole, all of it, if we use 100% of that instead of just the 78% for property tax relief, then that would gain us $113,000 for property tax relief. Are there any questions on any of these slides?
If I may.
Yep.
I have a question, and I apologize for being late, and so you may have discussed this. This is just people that live in the city limits that use Alliant Energy's gas and electric that get this tax. It's not energy that they produce in the city and ship to another customer would not pay us for that franchise fee. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So Alliant Energy pays a utility replacement tax on energy that they produce here, and that's part of our tax levy calculations at budget time, basically, is where that comes into play. So this is Alliant and Consumers Energy for electric, Alliant for gas. So it's those customers within city limits, knowing that both have territories outside of city limits as well, but Alliant and Consumer customers for electric in city limits and Alliant for gas in city limits.
And then people that produce their own energy are exempt from all of this.
So if you had someone who has solar panels and is therefore not using energy, you are correct that would basically reduce or minimize to a $0 amount what they would have to pay. Yes.
Thank you.
And it's businesses too, Gary. I don't know if you caught that on the sheets. It's all nonprofit, religious organizations, businesses.
Anybody that
Yeah.
uses energy.
Yep, just wanting to make sure we were, yep, thanks. All right.
You said fun earlier, so here I come.
Yes.
We did talk about infrastructure, and Jeff Hubbard, Park and Rec Director. We did talk about infrastructure and public safety. I would say that parks and the Aquatic Center and Coliseum are a little bit of infrastructure as well as quality of life, so it can be used to fund some of those things. A couple things that I just wanted to talk about is, when I started here 3 years ago, we didn't have any money in the CAP project to go to the Aquatic Center. Now we have $20,000 a year that can go for maintenance of things, which is great. This year we plan to replace some umbrellas and some chairs and things like that, and then all of a sudden a pump goes down and now we can't do some things because we need to use this money to replace a pump. So there's always things that the Aquatic Center is 16 years old. The life expectancy of a pool's 20 to 30 years, depending on how well you maintain them. So that's why I kind of talked to Jessica about putting some money in, at least to do some maintenance stuff on it to keep it going. I think we can keep it going 30 years and longer. But this funds could help with some things that maybe we weren't planning on addressing in that year at the Aquatic Center. The Coliseum, we did spend $4 million on it. It's a nice brand new facility, but she still is 94 years old in the outskirts of the bones and everything. And so there could be some things that could go wrong. I'm not predicting anything in the future years, but maybe 5 to 10 years, if we have vandalism, there could be toilets that get broken, sinks that get broken, things like that. There's going to be wear and tear on the walls from our indoor soccer leagues and basketball leagues. We need to redo the gym floor every once in a while. So those are all things that there's not really a budget for right now in the Coliseum for that. We did spend $500,000 on trails, which we got 1.75 miles replaced, which was great. We still have 6 to 8 more miles to go and future trail expansion out to Hardin County. So those are going to be some things that could be used for. You want to go to the next slide? Oh, I do.
Just, yeah.
All right. So you can kind of see some things this year where once we drain the aquatic center, we're going to go paint it ourselves, but at some point the aquatic center probably is going to need overall painting, which we just did at the Lazy River a couple years ago, but the main pool is going to need it here in the next couple years. That's not in the CIP budget right now. You know, we get money from GO bonds, from CIP, from donations, all those. We do have a good plan in our park master plan to take care of some things. Right now with the CIP project, we're taking care of one park a year. Well, we have 22 parks, so it'd be 20 years before we get through them all and then start over again. And they're saying playground equipment's probably lasting 10 or so years, so we're not going to get to them all in time. One of the other things, so here's some upcoming CIP projects: Timber Creek, BPW, Lawrence Park, and then Arnold's Park. Arnold's Park, why I kind of wanted to talk about that was last year we had the slide in Arnold's Park. Someone set it on fire, and so it burned and melted and wasn't usable anymore, so we had to take it down. The replacement cost was $9,500, and our deductible was, I think, $10,000, so we didn't have insurance to pay for it. So here we have a playground that's missing a piece of equipment that I don't have $10,000 for to replace it. So this could be one of those things that could help with some vandalism and other things that happen in parks that don't meet our insurance deductibles. And you know, with each of our park improvements we're doing, right now we're doing Elks Park. We're doing a $175,000 project there. The majority of that cost is lighting, sidewalks, ADA accessibility, signage, and things like that. What don't really, you know, the citizens want play features in there. So if we were to redo Arnold's Park here in 2026, this has 4 different play structures spread throughout the whole thing. If you do sidewalks to get to all those places, you know, that's an extensive amount of cost for not a lot of play enjoyment. Now, our recommendation for Arnold's Park would probably be create one new play structure somewhere between the entrance and the basketball court, create a sidewalk to go there, create some more open space. You know, back in the 80s when this was done, it was kind of, you spread things out so that the older kids were maybe going here down the slides, the younger kids were over here, kids were playing basketball. Now we're kind of putting everybody together with the play equipment, and there's play equipment for all ages that's more accessible type of thing. So that would be a change here. But anytime we're doing these replacements, you know, a third of our costs are for, I would say, non-fun related things. So having this extra franchise fee money could help make some of those necessary improvements, and then the CIP money could go for the actual fun stuff in the parks. Any questions about any of that? Thank you.
Good evening, Heather Thomas, Public Works. Before I dive into this, I wanted to make an introduction. David Deemer is over here. He started with the city last week. He is the building and facility superintendent, replacing Dave Daters, and I'm very glad to have him on board. I asked him to sit in so he could hear some of this information firsthand and get up to speed. And then I also wanted to let you know that I will likely go into a little bit more detail on the public facility side of things than some of the other possible uses of a franchise fee that will be presented to you today. And the reason I'm doing that is not because I'm recommending doing this. It's just to present information that you might not be getting in city council meetings, because this is not a topic that's generally on the agenda. So, public facilities, the city has quite a few. I split them into two categories, kind of the non-utility enterprise road use tax fund area, like the airport, police and fire, city hall, Carnegie library, those types of things. And then a second category of the ones that are tied directly to a type of utility. Right now, facilities are funded. Generally, annual repairs and maintenance are out of the general fund for that top category that was on the previous slide. Projects that are over $5,000, we do have Fund 031, which is a building maintenance fund. My understanding is there's funds in that from previous building sales. It's not something that continually gets additional revenue. Right now, it's saying the funding is set out to run out in fiscal year 26. That's based what's kind of in our our capital improvement plans. I do want to preface this and say that the reason it says it's going to run out in 26 is because we don't have a lot of projects in there. In the past, we've kind of operated on a repair or replace when it's broke and not functioning. If we kind of look at some preventative maintenance in those types of projects, that will run out significantly sooner. When I looked at that last, I want to say there was about $260,000 as a fund balance in that item. And then significant capital improvement projects is coming through GEO borrowing. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into specific buildings that are generally pulled out of a general fund. So first, I'll talk about the airport. The airport currently has a septic system out there. It is comprised of a tank and a leach field. The leach field stopped operating a while back. I can't even tell you when. So we had been using it as basically the septic tank is a holding tank. The city goes out, pumps it out every once in a while, brings it to our plant, and we've been operating like that. Several years ago in the recent past, that septic tank, the lid collapsed. So now we have an open concrete container that waste sits in out there, and we're still going out, pumping it out, bringing it back to the plant. So that's just an example of some of those things that have not been fixed because it comes out of general fund. We have limited general fund, so we're kind of minimizing the amount of repairs, I think is kind of how we've operated in the past. In addition to septic out there, the water service out there is a galvanized line. It's outside city limits. It comes from rural water. It's a very old line. It's discolored. It needs to be replaced. When heavy equipment drives over the top of it outside, some chunks on the inside can get off and run in with the water. We have a brand new terminal building that I'm happy to announce will be moving in our tenants next Monday. Excited about that. However, when you go into the brand new restroom and you look, turn on a faucet, look in the toilet, you kind of ask yourself, did somebody go and forget to flush? The water is that discolored. It is staining brand new fixtures, staining toilets and those types of things. So that is another project that is on the agenda that we really need to address. The detention basin out there, same thing. It's failing, the pipe's failing. So what we've done, we put a gate up. Nobody drives across the detention basin anymore to get to one of the things, and they use the runway and taxiway when a plane's not coming to get to some of the equipment out there. The hangar out there, a lot of the hangars are about 50 years old, large overhead doors. That's pretty expensive when those are needing to be repaired, and it is becoming more prevalent. Currently, we budget about $2,000 a year out there for building repair and maintenance. I just signed a bill last week for $2,500 for one door repair. So there's going to be some additional expenses, and we're going to have to figure out how to fund those. Next, I'm going to move on to a newer building. I do want to preface this saying that it is a building that's a heavy use building. It's in operation 24/7. It's the police and fire building. It's 3 years old. As a public safety building, it is also a secured access building, meaning there is restricted access, computers, sensors and everything at many, many doors. Many of you all have smartphones now. Essentially think of those types of components at every door that people go through 24/7. It's built to today's standards in regards to energy and resource efficiency, and that'll come into play here shortly as we go through some of the recent repairs that I think you guys have been seeing on some of my weekly reports. Between building operation, supply, maintenance, and general repair and maintenance, last year's budget was $2,100 for that building. We spent over $9,000. The reason we only spent 9,000 was because many of the parts we ordered for sensors and those types of things were on back order. And supply chain issues did not allow them to get here last fiscal year. So those are probably going to show up this year, and I'm expecting much more than $9,000 of repairs and maintenance this year and related to those items. Talking about some of the repairs that I think some of you are aware of, we had 3 interior water breaks in the period of less than 2 months. Each of those are on 2 or 3-inch water lines that are high up in an apparatus bay in some cases. It does require a special plumber to come in and do that. A lot of those parts aren't even available locally, so we had to shut off valves, wait to get parts, and then make those repairs. I mentioned the door access and car readers. We do have some issues with those that we do have to reach out and get those repaired. Again, not something we have the capabilities to do in-house. They are computers, they are proprietary systems, and we do need to go through those. HVAC controls are very important out there. We have the comm center there. We have a lot of police storage, server storage. Making sure we have climate control out there and evidence and everything is extremely important. We had a water heater go down last week. So again, all of these resource and energy efficient things like the water heaters out there, they all now have computers in them. And so when they go down, these aren't something that we can just go to Menards locally and grab a part and replace it. We're having to source that out and get a part sometimes from overseas for those electronic components, wait for it to come in and get that repair made. Light occupancy sensors and switches, again, in a home, you can go to Menards, buy a $5 switch, make that replacement. Here we have occupancies in the ceilings, sensors and those types of things. Instead of a $5 part, it's probably a $100 part to make that repair. Although I am happy to say that we do have a licensed electrician who has experience in that, so we're able to save some labor costs, but the material costs are still quite high. From a sanitary standpoint, a lot of the fixtures are now the no-touch fixtures. Prevents germs and those types of things. It is the standard in public facilities, but we had 2 urinals this past couple months ago, I think it was, fail. The sensors on those were $700 a piece. So when we talk about the budget I mentioned earlier of $2,100 a year, you can see how we've got a pretty big gap there. So whether it's a new building or not, constructing energy and resource efficient buildings puts all these computers in different areas, and it is a more expensive repair and replacement cost.
Heather, can we stop for a second?
You bet.
I just got a few questions, and some of this maybe doesn't really apply to today's conversation, but water heater replacement, I mean, so all this stuff outside of warranty, there's nothing that's covered, and then I guess my second question to that, if that's the case, who set the $2,100 maintenance budget?
Yep, I'll answer both of those. First one is anytime in the past 6 months that I've been over this, that's the first thing I check is where we're at on a warranty item. We have had one item come back that was warranty. They shipped a part that was under warranty. I've also reached out to construction managers on a couple of parts to see and a couple of defects, and we are outside that warranty period from the building construction side of things. And then as far as the budget goes, the budget was set before I started, I'm assuming, from the building and facility superintendent. I don't know that after the tornado and after the derecho in his defense, there were so many issues going on that I don't think we ever sat down and looked at a really good, realistic preventative maintenance and what it takes to maintain a brand new building. I just don't think that was one of the priorities that happened after. So now that we have additional information moving forward in budgeting times, I think we'll be able to set more realistic budget numbers there.
I would also add to that, so that budget would have been set in March of 2021, basically, and we'd been in the building for less than 2 years at that point. And I would say from the staff perspective, I think our expectation is we were not going to have to be doing so much in repairs and maintenance on what was effectively a brand new building compared to our other facilities so quickly.
I mean, I don't want to put it bluntly, we either got a shit product or we are ignorant from a budget setting perspective when it comes to that and what we bought versus what we knew we bought. I mean, that I get going into the level of detail you're going, and I respect that, but this is not the kind of time to learn some of it or have the expectations to learn some of it, and I would say some of it's a little bit disgusting, to be honest.
Yeah, I would say this building is not like any other building we have. There are features in this building that we don't have in any of our other facilities. And I would say ignorance around what it was actually going to take on an annual basis for repairs and maintenance is a very accurate statement. We just didn't know what we didn't know.
Yep, I would agree with that. I didn't know that. I'm shocked at some of the cost of some of the different parts that come back. I was not aware of those things. Moving through the other buildings.
I'd like to make a comment to that,
bet.
an editorial comment. Your predecessor, we paid you guys to know. The taxpayers pay the department heads to know their strengths, their weaknesses, their specialties. So looking over a design that has not common parts for a water pipe, like Gabe's saying is, you know, why are we signing off on a building construction, you know, that doesn't have everyday parts?
Yeah, let me clarify the everyday parts. They're readily parts used in commercial and industrial facilities. In Marshalltown, we don't have a commercial and industrial supplier of those parts. So we have to go outside of Marshalltown to get those parts. A residential, we're able to get 1 inch, 1.5 inch, 3/4 inch copper, but the size of the water facilities out at a fire station exceed what's available locally.
Thank you.
So I'll get into some of the older buildings now, which I think in many cases would be more thought-provoking, that there would be higher repair and maintenance costs. City Hall has a $5,000 budget a year. We did have a boiler system go down with gaskets. That repair bill was $12,000. We have some additional projects coming up in City Hall with the downstairs and the second floor being in relatively rough shape, currently not occupied spaces, but we still need to maintain some things from a moisture perspective. The Carnegie Building, which includes the building behind me and this Park and Rec building downstairs and council chambers. We do have some water damage in the basement. We have some pigeon issues on the roof, and that gets into the ceiling in the second floor. We have rodent issues in the basement as well. Right now, we have a $2,500 a year building repair and maintenance budget. We had an AC line have some condensation issues. That's very common, but half of our budget, was spent just repairing that one condensation line. The library, we have about $9,000 a year come from the tax levy towards building and maintenance on that. The remaining comes from the general fund. We have some HVAC projects coming up to better cool and maintain the cafe space. There's been a couple of small water leaks. Sidewalk around the building needs to be addressed from a safety perspective based on some insurance walkthroughs that have gone through. It has a full solar system on the roof that is partially functioning. And I honestly don't think at this point it makes sense to repair. We've kind of looked at some financial comparisons of that. And then we also have several of those same smart fixtures that I mentioned at the police and fire station that we are starting to need to repair at the library as well. The other buildings that are more enterprise utility focused, like transit, the street barn, sewer barn, water pollution control, and a lot of sheds and equipment storage, those all have needs as well. Where practical, we take those funds from non-general fund sources to make the repairs necessary in those buildings. There's not been a robust preventative maintenance program, as I think you guys are learning today, and I apologize if you're just learning some of those things today for the first time. But we have been operating on an emergency response to fix when it becomes an issue. And I will leave that at that and open it up to any additional questions. All right.
All right, how are we doing? That was a lot of information, 3 areas covered. Do you need like 60 seconds to collect your thoughts on what you've heard so far? If it switches anything from, like, I thought this was a negative, but now it's a positive, right? That kind of a thing? All doing okay?
The one thing I've learned is that deficit on paper is not representative of our true deficit.
Yeah, fair? Sure.
I'm gonna pretty much echo what Gabe said. I don't think we have a realistic preventative maintenance budget. We've got a 190-year-old building that has a
feel like we're in consensus around this issue and it's making all of our hands sweat. I'm curious about what the next action step should be from a city perspective to get what our current state really is and present it to the city council. Is there any suggestions on that?
What I would say is that Heather has been working on trying to get some of those preventative maintenance schedules ready for buildings. And I should remind you, Dave Daters passed away at the end of February, and we were just able to hire David here soon. So we've had a fairly significant deficit in personnel, and it is nobody's fault. It is a position that is difficult to fill, and it was only with making some changes to the job description that we were able to fill the position. So we're at a deficit of personnel, and I think we'll need to figure out what that's going to take to get that information. But my concern is we can present you all the information in the world, but if there's no money for it, then we still have the same problem. And so that's why I think this is important information to present to you today as we're talking about potential funding sources for things.
Jessica, I hear you, but what you just said is irrelevant. These aren't new issues. So respectfully disagree with where you're coming from on that. These are not emerging issues in the last 12 months. These aren't new maintenance things for a 120-year-old building. I mean, those have been in the budget for year on, year out. So what we're talking about here today are not new. They're maybe new from an awareness perspective, at least to the council, but not to staff, at least those that have been role. I know we have some changeover and everything else, and I hear you. So being able to address it to Dex's comment, yeah, I get we need maybe some education to catch up on where there's been some, what I would consider major gaps with what's been happening at the staff level, because it's, wow.
Yeah, and like just to have
Don't
it
need a
on-
rebuttal. We can move on.
Well, I just want to put a point of clarification here, because ultimately, this is something that comes up in the general fund budget each year. There is a special function for city hall buildings. Police and fire building is its own function as well. I'd say police and fire is one. We just didn't have any experience. We didn't know. City hall is one of those that we have continually scaled back and scaled back and scaled back, because we're trying to do everything we can to keep the personnel we have. And as we're at a point where that doesn't work, which is why we're having this work session today, because we're at the point where we can't fund what we need to do.
So if you're going to have a rebuttal, then I guess my question is, your expectation is when we come budget season here in 6 months, is that all of us go through line by line, 400 pages worth of the budget to critique everything that you guys are doing? That's what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying that we provide you that information so
Okay,
that
so that's what you're
questions
saying.
can be
So you can
asked.
say yes, that's ridiculous.
But I think that what we provided you in terms of a general fund reduction strategy was something that had reduction of items on it. So we provided that information.
Yeah. So what we have up to this point, we've heard.
Sue, I'd like to add to this, if I may. So again, I was 15 minutes late. Is this whole meeting about just the pros of a franchise fee? Or is there any cons coming
No.
up? Because what I'm hearing so far, what's being presented in the last 45 minutes to me is we have given up on trying to cut costs to balance our budget. We're going to go get this money from the taxpayers to fix all of our problems that we created ourselves over the years. In fairness to everybody, before any of us were in these positions. So
No, so-
what's the point of going on if this is just
No.
saying we need this franchise fee to fix all our problems because we're not smart enough to fix them on our own?
No, so at the very beginning, the way that we set up the conversation was a franchise fee is an available option to the city of Marshalltown. There are several cities, 209 cities in the state of Iowa, that are taking advantage of a franchise fee in order to supplement their general budgets. Okay, so that was how we set it up. And at the very beginning, actually, as you walked in, we'd ask council members to think about what are pros of that and what are cons of it, both things. What's being presented now is here are the things that where a franchise fee would allow us to help with the general budget, right? It would provide some relief for where we've had to be creative with how we take care of managing the city budget. Okay, so it is not, and by the way, at the end, the decision we're going to ask you for is, do we not talk about the franchise fee at all, like a red decision, it's a no, everybody feels like it's a no. Then we go back and we start to make different decisions, right, as a city. Where do I cut, potentially where do I cut services, or where do I need to change things, or where do I not do something this year? I'll use the parks as an example. Where do I not replace the slide? Because that's the one that my granddaughter loves slides, so that one's stuck in my brain. Don't know why you would set a slide on fire. Anyway, do that. A yellow, we want to go get some more information. We want 3 council members to do a subcommittee. Let's go get more information. Or a green, while the franchise fee does make sense, like there's enough need out there, and what we heard today would say we could support that. Let's move forward with that in order to increase the revenue that comes in. That's what it is. So this is not a yes or no, but we also, not a but. It's not a meant to be a pro. It's meant to say, council, we want to make sure you know how this could be used, because it makes a difference when you go out and talk to the public. Does that help?
That helps, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to then talk about the future disaster mitigation. So again, pay attention to what you wrote down as positives and negatives and what you're hearing and all of that. And we'll move on to who's ever got the levy freeboard project. Thank you. It's me. Yay!
I'll be much shorter this time. And I'm hopeful that many of these things are things you're aware of as well. Heather Thomas, Public Works. One potential use of a franchise fee is to look at future disaster mitigation and prevention. There are 3 items up here that I can kind of run through. Our levee system is inspected. It's switched to a 5-year rigorous inspection on each of our systems. We do have some areas that we do need to look at some capital improvements on. We have a couple of structural flood walls. They're not structurally deficient, they're cosmetically deficient. However, if you don't address the cosmetically deficient areas, they will become structurally deficient. We do have several gate wells that are needing some additional maintenance because they're non-operable, which is okay, that they just pretend they're always closed and you can't use them as function as designed. We would like to get those operational again. Traditionally, the levee system is funded through stormwater utility rates. I think many of you are aware our stormwater utility rate fund is quite tight, and we will need to be looking at and prioritizing the different stormwater projects coming up. The levee freeboard project is one that has come through council, although many of you may not have been on council when that was being discussed. The Corps of Engineers would like to raise our levee system to provide additional freeboard of what's there today. Those are standards that have changed, and there's a little bit of inconsistency between DNR and the Corps as far as how much freeboard you need. At the time that was brought to council, it was estimated to be an over $10 million project. In addition, we have tornado sirens in town. We have 8 of them. It is an older system, and right now we're operating on a, repair and maintain it as long as we can. We, so far, luckily, since I've been here, they've been limited to belt issues and fuse issues, and we would continue with those. But at some time, it would be potential to get a more robust, newer system in that would be less prone to maintenance items. And that is all I have on the future disaster and mitigation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, David Ryerson, Fire Department. So I'll just start off with what my total budget is for this fiscal year. At $3,580,561. That's my budget for this fiscal year. I am not a revenue generator. I only generate about 2 to 2.5% of my budget based on fees, and 54,000 of that comes from fire service protection to the veterans home. And then illegal burn fees, permit fees, those types of stuff. So I am not a revenue generator. My budget is 92% personnel costs. So that's roughly what, $3.3 million and somewhere in that area. So after personnel costs, I run my department on $286,000 a year. So when we did our budget preparation last year, we did a budget, and then the department heads were asked to cut more. So when it comes to living within our means, I went back and I cut additional, just like all the other department heads did. We went back and we cut money out of our budgets. Where I cut money out of my budget was for training, for uniforms and personal protective equipment and repairs and maintenance. I don't have very many more places that I can cut. And then as far as supply chain issues, the price increases, I've taken a price increase in nearly every category of my line item. My personal protective equipment, the fire gear we wear, has gone up $500 a set. Fire apparatus maintenance, some of our mechanics don't have the ability to repair our pumps and some of the hydraulics on our ladder trucks, which means I have to use outside vendors to fix them. That's expensive. Fuel costs. I've already used 29% of my fuel budget this year already, and we're not even 2 months into the fiscal year. So that's had some significant issues for us. And then I just found out our records maintenance system, which is like all of our inventory of equipment and training records and the cost to have that system is going from $5,400 a year to $16,000 a year. I don't know where I'm going to get it. And then CIP purchases that were approved for this fiscal year, we did the budgets back in November. Every item in my CIP for this year, the price has increased. So I'm going to end up taking $3,400 out of the donation fund to make up that difference in price increases. Then speaking of donation fund, we were very fortunate that we received a large bequest from a citizen of the community when he passed away. And I have used that money to help supplement items that I've needed in my department. I've replaced staff vehicles with that money. I've purchased tools and equipment for my fire trucks. I've done some repair work and upgrading to another vehicle. I've bought fire hose with it. I've upgraded the mobile data terminals in our fire trucks with that money, and then I used some of that money to fund the deficit in the large capital fleet when we purchased our fire trucks. I used some of the money to offset that costs. I have offered to forego pay increases in my salary to help fund positions in the fire department. As far as staffing goes, I'm staffed to the positions that I am allotted by the city, but I need more staffing. I started as the fire chief 8 years ago, and we're running 1,000 more calls a year than we did when I started as the chief. And as you're aware on the city council, from my annual report a few months ago, the number of overlapping calls that we have, the times when we don't have people available to run calls has increased as well. So that's my report to you, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Chief, if I may, this is a little unrelated. You talked about the new fire trucks. Did we ever get the 2 old fire trucks sold?
Finally, yes.
So they're both gone now?
Yeah, they're both
Okay.
gone.
Because somebody asked me, and I didn't know if we ever got those sold.
Yes, we did.
Okay, thank you.
We got more for the ladder truck than what we thought we would, and we got less for the pumper than what we thought we would.
And of course, we put that money back into you, right?
Well, that money went to.
We didn't borrow the total, it
Right.
was, basically, we reduced our borrowing based on what we thought we would get back in sales proceeds.
Okay.
Other questions? Nice. Police, chief.
Good afternoon, Mike Tupper, Marshalltown Police Department. So, I also have a staffing issue. You heard the fire chief talk about staffing. We have a staffing issue, and you're well aware of that because I talk about it almost every meeting now. But, I've made it very clear in the 11 years that I've been here now that we have a budgeted strength of 42 police officers. 42 never means 42 because we always have a couple spots open. We have people on light duty because they get injured. We have people deployed because they're in the military. There's a lot of factors that go into staffing. We have work for 50 police officers. And I know that this franchise fee is not going to solve that problem for me, but we've had some discussions with the city council about using technology and policy and ordinances as force multipliers to help us address some of these issues. So technology is very expensive, and trying to keep up with technology is a problem for us. Tasers, body cameras, vehicles, computers, everything that we need to do our job every day, those costs are going up. And training for our officers going up. I just signed off on a training request for an officer today so he could go to interview and interrogation class for a week. It's going to be $500 just for the training. I'm going to have to pay lodging and meals and gas to get him there, okay? All of that stuff is increasing. I think Mr. Walker said it, inflation is real. We're seeing that in our everyday costs and everyday expenses. Our fuel budget, just through the end of July, so just the first month of the fiscal year, we expended almost 13% of our fuel budget. We should have been at 8%. So all of that stuff is going up. And the only solution for me with fuel would be tell my cops to quit patrolling, and you don't want me to do that, right? So we have some real concerns. Now, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been in a leadership position since 1997. I've been a chief of police in the state of Iowa for 18 years. I will tell you, the first 2 communities that I worked in, going out to the public to solicit donations for your operations would have been taboo. We just did not do it. It was frowned upon. This is something that we do frequently here in this community, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but we've been relying on donations to help fund public safety for many, many years, and this all predates me. Our canine program, when I got here, very successful program, a program that's very popular in this community. When I got here, it was 100% funded by donations, vehicles and everything. And so working with Randy Wetmore and the city council at the time, we were able to change some of that. And so now we're funding some vehicle costs, but our canine program is still largely funded through donations. Our child safety seat program funded through donations. Probably a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, we went out to the community to raise money for body armor and ballistic helmets so that our officers have the safety equipment that they need to safely do their job, okay? We have a 2-dog canine program that you're well aware of. Right now we're at 1 dog because we had 2 retire at the same time. We would like to purchase another dog next year, and when I do that, because I'm not going to be the police chief to kill the canine program, when I do that, our canine fund is going to be virtually depleted. And it's expensive to manage a canine program. There's veterinarian bills, there's equipment costs, there's training needs. Those are some things that we've been using donations for that we're kind of running out of possibilities. And as you know, in our community is very generous. And I know that when I go out to the community and ask for help, that they'll help me. But there's a lot of organizations in the community that are asking for help too. And at some point, we run out of available donation opportunities. I think I mentioned body cameras. That's really expensive. We're already on our 2nd generation of body camera. It's about $1,000 per camera. That seems like a lot of money, right? It is a lot of money. That's the cheap part, because I have to store all the data. And we're not going to be able to get rid of body cameras. The public demands body cameras, but we have to store the data, and we're storing the data for long periods of time. That's getting very expensive. We have to upgrade servers every year. We could look at cloud storage. Cloud storage is also very expensive and maybe not the best solution for us. Vehicles. Last fiscal year, at the end of the fiscal year, you approved the purchase of a detective vehicle, which was a used vehicle that we were able to purchase in Marshalltown, right? And our detective vehicles aren't spec'd to be police cars. They're just used vehicles that we buy. Usually we buy locally. We paid almost new car prices for that vehicle because everything's going through the ceiling, okay? I just learned here recently that the Department of Public Safety had a major vehicle order canceled by Dodge because they can't come up with the cars. And so now police departments across this country, I used to come to you 6 months in advance to order vehicles. Now police departments across this country are ordering their vehicles 18 to 24 months ahead of time because they can't get them. Vehicles are getting very expensive. The equipment we put in the vehicles are very expensive. It's getting to be very difficult to keep up with those costs. Training. Last year, we cut a significant amount of money from the police department budget. You know where it comes from? Training. It comes from maintenance, equipment and maintenance. It comes from fuel. We cut fuel expenses. Okay, that's the dirty secret about government budgeting. And I know that we're all very upset about what's going on with maintenance budgets for buildings, but that's what governments do, because that's all that's left, unless we start cutting people. And I just told you I don't have enough cops, so cutting the police department would not be a good thing for us personnel-wise. Public safety cameras is a program that we've talked about in this chamber. I think it's a good program. Putting up more public safety cameras would be a good thing. The franchise fee might help us do that. We've put up a few cameras. We're going to be putting up a few more. You allocated $150,000 that we're going to do a study with a committee to see how we spend that money. But there's lots of things happening in our community, lots of positive things. We're building new things all the time in this community. Cameras could be used as a force multiplier for the police department to help us protect what we're investing in as a community. Franchise fee might help with that. So I will get off my soapbox, but that's kind of where we're at with some of the things that we think the franchise fee could help with in the police department, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Your Honor. Chief, I just wanted to say congratulations. I saw that you did hire an existing police officer.
We did, yeah.
So congratulations on that.
Yeah, we're fighting the recruitment battle, but I think we got a good one, so thank you.
We also sent an officer out east, I think it is.
Yeah.
At a really prestigious deal where you have to get invited to do it. I know you and Jones.
Batterson, who's recently retired, yeah.
Exactly. We're able to make that cut, and I was glad she could make that cut too.
Yeah.
But that, you have to fly her out there.
Well, she drove out there. Wow. FBI pays for a lot of the cost for that opportunity. We're paying her salary, though. And, you know, the thing is I think training is really important in my field. I think you agree with that. I have around $18,000 a year to train 47 employees. That's not enough. And we cut corners. We do a lot of things in-house. We try to host training where we can. But there are just some things that our staff needs that we have to send them to. And we're running out of training dollars to be able to afford to do that. I have virtually, other than what is minimally required for me as your police chief, I have virtually cut out all leadership type training for me the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm happy to do that because I want my staff to be able to attend training. But I would also say that I think it's important that your leadership in the police department receives some training too, but we're cutting back when it comes to upper level leaders so that other people in the department can go to training.
One more thing, Your Honor.
Sure.
I do want to disagree with one thing you said, Chief. As little as I know Nick, I would disagree. We do have 2 police dogs, Ajax and Nick. So. Okay,
all right. I'll let him know you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a nice picture of Nick and his dog too, by the way. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Back for more.
Heather Thomas, Public Works. This is another eligible expense for the franchise fee. Just like my last one, I'm hoping much of this is knowledgeable to things we've discussed in the past. This is able to fund utilities and enterprise funds. So for us, that's Marshalltown Municipal Transit. Eligible expenses under Marshalltown Municipal Transit is bus purchases. Right now, we are responsible for 15% of that locally. We're using our tax levy for that, and the remainder we're using grant funds for. There's also a request out there for some additional bus shelter upgrades, which would be an eligible expense. Our stormwater fee and our stormwater fund, we are funded through a utility fee. It funds things like box culverts, manholes, intakes, and the storm sewer system throughout our city. The needs definitely exceed available funds on that one again. We're always getting additional wants and requests on that we just can't do with the funds that we have on hand. It can also fund things like the levee and the stormwater pump stations. Sanitary sewer and the wastewater control facility. We are in the process of 2 major projects on that project. It's all being funded through utility rates on our bi-monthly bills with the CIPP and the Headworks project. But all of these utilities are also eligible franchise fee expenses. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Streets, bridges, sidewalks.
I know. I feel like I hear that a lot. All right, I'll remember to change the slides so we can look at pictures this time. But just a quick rundown of several of the upcoming projects or current projects and how they're being funded today. The street improvement program, that is what I'm generally calling funds that we put into streets for rehab and replacement above and beyond somebody going out with cold patch or a duro patcher to maintain our streets. The Center Street Bridge Project, Phase 2, that will be coming this next year. Many of those finger joints, and everybody's familiar with those, out on the Center Street Bridge. Street lights are funded through road use tax. Right now, we don't have a installing new street lights fund necessarily, but we are paying for utility expenses out of road use tax on that. In addition to sidewalk projects are coming from the GEO bond primarily, with the exception there's been some allocation from lost funds for an incentive program to replace sidewalks throughout some private areas in town. So street needs. In July of 2021, the engineering department came and presented to City Council at that time, so I know some of you were here and some of you were not. However, at that time, they looked at expenditures to put towards our street system, and they projected what the street conditions would be if you invested $3, $6, $8, and $10 million a year. At that time, it was determined an investment of $8 million a year towards maintenance. So this is, again, above and beyond the cold patching, the dura patching. This is rehab and replacement type things. An investment of $8 million a year would maintain the level of streets in our community in the same numbers under very poor conditions. In other words, we're maintaining, not improving, where we have those streets in the very poor conditions status. So we weren't really making headways at reducing the numbers of very poor condition streets until we hit a $10 million investment a year, and that was looked at a 10-year period. So $10 million a year for 10 years was kind of the funding at that time that was presented. That was based on a study done based on pavement condition indexes. Those values in that study was done pre-tornado. We are in the process this year of working with Pathways and the DOT to get additional information and updated information. I talked to the DOT earlier this week. They have finished data collection in Marshalltown of that information of all of our streets. They drove every lane, every street, dead end, every surface, and they're expecting to have that information back so that I can start analyzing it by the end of the year to kind of put together a more formal street improvement program. When I get calls on the streets, I know one of you reached out to me recently. It's difficult for me because I go out and look at the street and I'm like, yes, it absolutely needs help. I would love to help that street. A lot of times those streets that I'm getting the most calls on, they're past the ability to rehab and they're really at a replacement standpoint. The recent one, I went out and looked at it and I'm like, yep, that's rough. We're throwing cold patch at it all the time to try to maintain it and let it drive. But I went back to that list that was developed before the tornado as far as where the pavement condition index was of that. And it was 403rd on the list. In other words, there's 402 segments in Marshalltown in a technically worse condition than what that one was. So I don't think I need to expend any more time talking about our street systems. There's a need there. We're currently underfunding that need, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I really appreciated you providing the data on $10 million a year keeps us just as bad as we are.
$8 million a year.
$8 million.
On the very poor condition streets, yes.
Can we remind for the meeting what we're currently spending on all street repairs combined, meaning
Yep.
time, cold patching, and remodel, resurface, all of it?
So the $8 million a year number that I used is comparable to rehab and everything above and beyond the cold patching. So right now, the city, I believe this past year, funded $3 million in GO funds towards what would be equivalent of that $8 million mark. And I believe there's been discussion at the $4 million level for the next GO fund.
Do you have any idea how much money we use road use tax for wages?
For wages, road use tax funds all of our wages for our street department, with the exception, I believe, the benefits come out of property taxes. I don't know the exact split of how many is a wages, but I can tell you that we definitely have more work than staff that could be putting towards street maintenance and street repair.
We can get you that number and email it out after the session.
So when you get that report back on the streets, will we talk about that at council? Or are we going to have maybe a
Absolutely.
special deal to talk about that? I know it's a big topic amongst the voters.
Absolutely. My plan is when I receive that information from them, I will look at those segments. There is an online website that'll be accessible to all of you, all of the public as well, to go on there and look area by area, lane by lane, the rating of each of those streets. We will then look at that, a comparison, and talk about prioritizing funding. I know in the past, a lot of times the priority list has been very heavily weighted on average daily traffic of that street. And that has caused some issues, especially in the lower residential use areas, residential use areas. So it is my intent that we present something to you guys for consideration that looks at different segments of traffic uses and funds multiple areas throughout town, not just the higher traffic streets.
Got it. Heather, when you get that information, will it be like a 0 through 10 scale or a B, C, D, F?
Yeah.
Is what we've been using.
Right. There's different ratings. One's called PCI, which is Pavement Condition Index. That is a numerical number. The lower the number, the worse the condition. However, all of that is translated into ratings: very poor, poor, moderate, good, excellent, and almost new condition. So I think it's about 7 ratings, and it's color coded. So that would probably be what would be most available and understandable by the public.
And what you're saying about your predecessor, was going by traffic counts. There's a lot of houses that have been in streets in this town that they've been there for over 100 years. They've paid a lot of property taxes, and they're just entitled to get their street fixed too. Just because they're the only ones that drive on it doesn't make it, any less important to them.
Absolutely.
And then one last question. Dex and I are over here. We're confused. What's in the top right-hand corner? We're not.
Yeah, that is an underside of the Center Street Viaduct. So that is underneath the finger joint that you see there. Actually, at one of the pillars, it's off to the side. It's not actually in the finger joint picture, but that is one of the items that will be addressed this next year. Thank you.
All right, economic development.
Michelle was originally going to do this, but she's at a Brownfields conference in Oklahoma City this weekend, so I thought I would speak to this. So economic development activities and projects is one of the uses, and we looked at what are those things that we're currently doing. Each year we have support for the Chamber and the Central Business District, along with the Central Business District Incentive Grant Program, that we are certifying as TIF debt, tax increment financing debt. And so when we do that, then it basically, for the portion of money that we're asking for, it does sort of withhold that from the total taxable value. And we then basically end up, taking little bits and pieces away, not only from our general fund, but from the county and from the school district's general fund as well. So this would be, if economic development was one of the purposes selected, if this moves forward, we'd be able to look at funding those in a different way. One of the other things that we've done in a post-tornado world was look at a $50,000 new construction incentive for anything within the Marshalltown Central Business District. And so we've been using local options sales tax with that. And I think we have just one of the original $250,000 that is still unallocated at this point. The other thing, when we look at how Michelle's wages and my wages are allocated, we don't have economic development as an allocation. We're generally sticking to our own areas in the general fund, Michelle being planning and zoning, mine being city administrator. And so if we were allocating out the hours that we spend to that and had a funding source for that, we would be able to help offset some funds there. And then just to get into some of the things that we do talk about from an economic development perspective frequently, the downtown Edgewood Industrial Park, Highway 14 corridor, that we could create a program with these funds to offset what we're currently using other resources for, whether it's TIF or local option sales tax, or look at this as a way to provide some sort of additional incentive for continued development. As I mentioned, Michelle's at the Brownfield conference here. So we have a grant now that is good through 2024. But after that, everyone will be up to their own devices to get phase 1 assessments and phase 2 assessments without assistance from the city when that grant does expire. And then just another thing that we've talked about very continuously is looking at land and land for housing, land for industrial purposes, commercial revitalization type of activities, where that could certainly be a use for any economic development and activity function under this funding source. I'm happy to take any questions.
Jessica, remind me, how much is the total for the support for the chamber and the Marshalltown Central Business District?
The chamber is $50,000 a year. The MCBD, I think we're at $34,000. For that's for the incentive grant, right? Okay, 40,000 for the MCBD, and then the incentive grant, I think the most recent was 45,000. So $45,000 to $50,000 a year, depending on what they've forecasted for us as potential projects that they have coming forward.
Your Honor. And Jessica, with the development incentives, do we have to be careful that that wouldn't fall into the tax abatement?
Oh, certainly. That's like in our TIF agreements currently, we put that you're not eligible. If you take TIF, you're not eligible for any abatement program.
Yeah, I just want to get back to the things we can't use the franchise fee for, that this isn't a gray area, is it?
No, it's not a gray area. So essentially, this heading, economic development project and activities and projects, is what Iowa code says. And so there is a lot of what I would call flexibility for a local government to develop what that looks like in their jurisdiction.
All right, thank you.
All right. Some financial analysis.
Yes. So one of the things that when we started putting this presentation together that we were really hoping to do was sort of give you some tangible numbers as to what each of these functions would look like, and then realize that is biting off quite a bit and might be biting off quite a bit unnecessarily if this is not something you want to move forward. And so as we went through each of those uses, we tried to identify where are some of the current sources for some of those functions. And so this table here really sort of summarizes that on a larger level, where you can see kind of what's coming from the general fund, being a lot of the parks and city buildings, as well as public safety, and then some level of economic development. The CIP fund, which is funded through the 67.5-cent tax levy that we have, does support a few of those functions. Fund 030, which Heather talked about, is the fund where sale proceeds from buildings has gone into. That's funding a lot of our current building repairs, but that is a limited amount of money. We are using road use tax to some extent for our streets and bridges and economic development where possible. Local option sales tax has been a wonderful tool to help fill in gaps where needed on some, like the public safety camera program. I don't think if we didn't have those funds, I don't know that we would be able to move as readily forward with that program. Same with looking at our streets and bridges and some of our economic development. One economic development item, just to remind you of with local option sales tax, was providing Sims Construction a $100,000 grant for the 26 East Main Street renovation in order to kind of keep them from going to a place where they were going to have to pursue funding to income restrict. Donation funds are heavily used in parks as well as police and fire. Tax increment financing is one of those things that does hit our economic development. Stormwater, again, stormwater and wastewater really are proprietary funds and should be operating that way. We will have a stormwater rate study coming to you hopefully in the next 2 months or so, which will be recommending a rate increase based on the capital projects that we currently have planned. And so we can certainly have some more discussion about stormwater and stormwater projects there. And as you can see, we're doing a lot of general obligation borrowing to kind of hit a lot of those areas that we currently have as well. And so we just wanted to put this together as an analysis, and I'd say if there's further instruction of we would like to see really what is the financial impact in any one of these areas, it's something that we can come back with as staff working together with a little bit more direction.
Any questions? All right. So then, if we choose to move forward with a franchise fee, we wanted to make sure that everybody had the information in front of them for what an adoption process would look like. Again, this is just to help with our red, yellow, green decision so that we know if we were to say green, we would need to have a revenue purpose statement and then go through all of these other steps that are outlined on the slide. So are there any questions on that? And again, if we go back to one of the earlier slides, it's also the council could put it forth as a special election, or there could be a reverse referendum that could come from citizens if they were to decide for that. So those that potential isn't listed, I guess, in this process, if you will, right? If that came about, it would these steps would still need to happen, and there would be the steps for the reverse referendum. I guess I just want to point that out. Any questions on that?
I'd be amazed if any of the cities had actually used a reverse referendum to do this. For the ones that you talked about at the very beginning, did anybody go that way?
I don't know that. That information is not on the Association for Municipal Utilities website, but I can see what we can find out about that.
I'd bet good money against it, I guess. Okay.
Okay. All right. So with that, I'd like you to take a couple minutes. I'm going to share a couple of observations that I had as I was listening to everything. And this goes for you to consider. So one, I heard several of the directors share, as we all know in our, I think Dexy, you were the one who said it first at the beginning, a lot of the cost of things goes up. So whatever is budgeted today for a new vehicle is not what the cost is going to be 6 months from now, and we should keep that in mind. I also know that we didn't talk about it today, but I think some of the background as I was preparing for this, there are changes in what the state supplies to cities, or changes in state laws. So also some of the changes in the budget and what's funds that are available are not just due to the city of Marshalltown itself. There are changes at a state and a federal level. I will also want us to keep that in mind as we're talking about whether a franchise fee makes sense. It's not all about budgeting decisions that were made or not made in the past for the city of Marshalltown. I think that's important as we look at it. On a positive side, as I listened to the directors talk, I also heard, gosh, it's not like you would do a franchise fee and wonder what to do with the money. So if you were to decide yellow or green on the decision, there's obviously a lot of very practical uses for that right away. And so I think that that's also a positive as you start to look at it. So I'd like for you to take a couple minutes again by yourself, and I want you to think about if voters had a lot of this information or some of this information or what you all know now after listening to all of this, what are some of your concerns that still exist? What are some of the positives that you see? I want you to take a couple minutes to write that down, because then again, we'll go into this red, yellow, green decision, of red being, we don't want to talk about this anymore, right? When I say anymore, I don't mean forever, right? I mean anymore for whatever the foreseeable future. Knowing that as we head into budget, then that creates some different conversations, right, for the staff, for projects that we could do. And it might not mean projects don't get done ever. It might mean, I'm going to use the park example again. It might mean that if I have 22 parks, it takes 22 years before equipment is touched, as opposed to 10 years when the equipment wears out, I think was the example. But so it could be a statement of time, not a statement of never. The yellow is, we heard information that makes me say, I don't think we should say no, except I'm also not ready to say yes yet. There's more information that I would need. And if we go in yellow, then we would love to have 3 council members that would say, we know, we'd like to take that as a subcommittee and go investigate it further, so that we can come back and have all of the information we might need. And then the green would be, I've heard enough today to know that this is something that we need to do. I say let's move forward with the adoption process to get a franchise fee, and that's what we want to do again. So that's where we're headed. So again, I want to give you a couple minutes to write down your thoughts, and then we'll ask for the red, yellow, green decision, so that we know how best to move forward. All right?
related to not being able to identify the needs and the burdens that our departments are under. But one of the things that I really disagreed with during this meeting and would like to see a committee focus on is the response that it doesn't matter if we know what our current state is if we don't have the money that we need to solve the problems. But I think that the purpose of us coming together and finding out where we're really at, what it's going to take to maintain these buildings and operate Marshalltown in a safe and efficient way, will help us when we approach the public with a need like this to say, hey, this isn't going to excess, this isn't going to the desires of a few. We want to prioritize based on critical needs that Marshalltown needs to satisfy in order to be a healthy and welcoming community for others to come to. Jeff?
Sure. I'll wait till she's done with her notes.
It'd help if I could spell today, right, Jeff? I was like, oof.
I'm also a yellow. Obviously, there's a lot of need from doing what a city needs to do. I guess the reason why I'd be yellow is I want to make sure that we spend this money correctly. I just don't want it. I think we need to be strategic about it. What can we spend this money on to really move the needle on projects that we need done that hopefully free up future revenue sources to help with some of the preventative maintenance and just deferred maintenance that we've had. I mean, it's very typical for any organization to have deferred maintenance on things. But, you know, I think the council needs to be a little more informed about all of that, and it's our responsibility to get that taken care of, so.
Thanks. Who would you like to hear from next?
Listen to Al.
I would be, I'm going to call myself a light green. I see,
That just makes my heart happy. It's like being back with all my engineering friends at Danfoss. We always got like 4.256 or something when we would answer. Go ahead, Al, I'm sorry.
I see a need, but to put this on the individuals, the people, and make them do more is tough decision to throw out there. I mean, we're hitting them now pretty hard. And if we want to do streets, which I've been running on for 16 years, that we need more. And I would like to see the $10 million a year for 10 years, but I don't know how you do that. So everything you hear every day is streets. No matter what kind of conversation you're in, it always comes back to streets. And now we got 100 other things going on. That makes it even tougher yet. So to put more on the taxpayer is a bad time to do it.
Thanks, Al. Who would you, got a couple left, 3 left.
Since I was a light green, I'll be a dark green. We talked about it, we've made budget decisions around streets and everything else, so I think putting a committee together does nothing but waste time. It's a sad excuse of delaying a decision in my humble opinion, or not so humble. At the end of the day, all we heard today was a discussion around how we need to be more critical of the budget come budget season. If we're wanting to refund or to put more money towards streets when we did it budget last year, and we talked about it the year before, it's pretty clear what the priority needs to be, and everything else comes down to a general fund discussion on what we cut and what we don't.
Thanks, Gabe.
Gary.
About Barry.
Barry, I guess you are on the phone now. Do you want to talk?
I'll talk. I'll disagree with Gabe. Where I think we need the committee is, are we doing 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5%? You know, that's where I'll say the value of the committee is, because we have a perception problem here in town. The public doesn't understand the financial crisis of the city. We haven't done a good job of saying, we can't do everything you want. You know, we all want to live in Emerald City, but like Al says, we got to fix the yellow brick road first. You know, we got to do streets and stuff. So, you know, I'd like to see some numbers compared to these other cities on your graph here, because the median household income in Marshalltown, Iowa is $54,000. And I would bet you money that all but maybe 2 of us on this council, the median household income is $150,000 to $175,000. So, and there's a great divide in this city, but the tracks separate the city. So looking at 5%, that in my house, my little house, that would give me another half-month bill. So, you know, so what I pay now for gas and electric, if we decide to go both routes, you know, full 5%, you know, you're going to add another half month's bill to me. So, and that's something I think the poor side of town needs to look at. You know, again, that's that perception issue. And getting back to probably what Mike said, can we make a case for the franchise fee? We can make a case if it'll be heard. That's something else. And then I think the other thing is how we spend that money and what we use it for. That's where we're going to get all the doubters, because, you know, we've really got to sell not only the franchise fee, but we got to sell where that money's going, because I think there's a lot of, again, that perception issue. People think we're throwing money away. You know, we're not taking care of the bare necessities. So, anyway. So I guess I'm a yellow.
Thanks, Gary. And tell me again who was on the phone. I missed Barry. Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to hear. I think you said my name, correct?
Yes, I did. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. So I apologize. I joined late. Don't have all the context or all the information that you have, but I would lean green, probably land green, for the limited information I heard on the call, for the simple fact of all the needs that we have in the budget issue. I mean, something needs to be done. How we message that, how we sell that, those are the details that we have to work through. But if we're serious about any of this, whether addressing the streets, I heard a couple council members bring that up, or the deficit. Obviously, selling safety seems to be a pretty easy task on our part, but I know we're all fearful and concerned with the perception that we're just continuing to tax people and spending our way out of problems, et cetera, which is valid. That's a consideration that we need to take. But once we start cutting services to get our budget where we need to be, or making cuts to help fund some of the essential infrastructure needs, I think that's when we're going to start to really hear the public come back. So again, apologize for being late. Didn't see all the numbers, don't have all the context, but there's a need here, without a doubt.
Thank you. Mayor.
They call me Mellow Yellow. No. I'm green, but that's for several reasons. We're at a point where we are absolutely in a growth mode like Northern Micropolitan, and we're doing it after 2 major disasters, 3 actually. And so while we're we're increasing the housing, that's going to increase the tax base, get more kids in school. This is not the time to put the brakes on and say, well, we're not going to put in any more sidewalks. Every time I drive by 12th Avenue, by the way, I think about Al over there, because he not only pushes for the streets to be in good shape, but to put in sidewalks that make it more safe for kids to get to schools and all. This is not the time to put the brakes on. I drive by Bondurant all the time because the main office is down in Des Moines, and that place is growing really fast, and I don't know how they're accommodating things, but I also look at their housing and think, geez, you know, I'm glad we're putting in some really nice houses here and some nice apartments and nice condos, as well as the places just down State Street here where the people that can't afford it but need a nice, clean, safe place to live will have it. It's not the time to put the brakes on. It's time to hit the green and figure it's green light. I had dinner last night with 2 lawyers and the director of the hospital that just got built here. And I'm thinking today, you know, I went through vicariously the experience that hospital board had when they found out, oh my God, micropolitans, our size hospitals just aren't making any money. We're not getting the type of reimbursement we need. We can't compete with the big cities. We can't compete with the little Grundy centers. We're in the wrong level, and we didn't know that we were losing so much money, bleeding this out and bleeding that out, and we ended up in bankruptcy. Well, we've got a new hospital. We've got a new board. Things are looking up there. We're about ready to open up a new McFarland clinic and an airport terminal. This is a time where we need more water, we need more electricity, we need more workers in town here, and we're growing, and so I wouldn't even slow down. I just keep the brakes going. So bright green would be me. But I also recognize that it's easy to complain and carp, and at the beginning I said when I moved here, you know, the cost of utilities was higher here than the little burg I was in before, and so it's no easy task. But I look around the town, as Al and I do every weekend. We drive around to look at the different infrastructures going around here. I look at what we've been able to do. The electorate here has come up with the right vote to get things done. It took 2 votes on the jail. It took 2 votes on the police and fire building. It took 2 votes on the college improvements. It often takes the citizens to think, no, wait a minute, I don't want to get taxed. And then they find out, oh, well, but we could be making more money if we house more prisoners, or, hey, we're losing some of the people to different hospitals around here if we don't do this. People finally got a tour of the basement of this building and the old fire department and realized the walls were collapsing and they needed a new place. So by God, we got that passed. This was not be an easy sell, but it's something I think we're going to have to do, and it probably will take 2 times, is my best guess. It reminds me, you know, Al and I were on here 10 years ago when we were told that we had a water problem. We have to comply with the DOT. We're getting close to not having enough, making enough progress to keep in good graces with the state. And so we had to look at the increase in fees to be able to cover those sorts of things. That was not an easy pill for us to swallow when we were on the council here. It wasn't an easy sell to the public. But we had to do it, and we knew it, and we did it, and we're doing it again. Apparently, you know, everything else, the prices are going up with everybody else. That's going to happen again, too. So it may not be an easy sell, but for those that are thinking, hey, yellow, we certainly do need to look at this more. I'd love to put together a committee that will prioritize and come up, is it 1 or 4 or 5 or 10 million or 8 million or that sort of thing, and come back to us. And then since we're all elected to do the right thing, if we get behind it and all 7 of us sell it to the public, I think that it'll probably happen. I talked too long.
That was good. I was going to say, by my count, there were 4 yellows and 4 greens. I think, Mayor, you said something similar. Gary, when you said yellow, what I heard was yellow, not because I want to investigate the franchise fee more, but because I want a subcommittee to come back with a recommendation on what the franchise fee % should be. Okay, so based on that, I'm going to say I think it's 5 green on the yes to a franchise fee. Huh? You're there too. Oh goodness, look at this. Was it my amazing just recap right there, Dex? All right, so based on that, then I think the vote, it would be, where we got to 6 or 5, saying yes, move forward with the franchise fee, 2 saying a little bit more investigation. In both cases, though, let's put a committee together in order to determine what the percent will be. And I'm going to say maybe the story, how the initial outline of how the story will get told. Is that, hopefully that language fits okay. So the initial, hate to use the term marketing because I'm not sure that that's the right word either, but the story to share with the public. How will it be used? Why do we need it? That kind of a thing. Is that right? So I don't know. Now I'm going to ask for order. Do we need to actually have a motion? I'm looking at you, Mayor, because I actually, right at this moment, don't know if we need to like do a motion for that to carry, or do we just pick the subcommittee? So I'm going to have you guys help me with the right procedural, if there's any right procedural.
I always look to the one who gets paid more than I do to give us direction on what the staff needs for direction.
Yes, thank you.
I would say technically it would be nice to have that motion to direct the mayor to assemble a committee. I think that would be the best direction.
Okay, so in
I
the,
would solicit that motion at this time then.
Before we do that, Your Honor, may I ask an administrative question?
Sure.
If this did proceed and we set a franchise fee amount, a percentage, what's the process for future councils to change the amount?
So to change the amount, you would have to go through the ordinance amendment process, basically. Yes.
Thanks, Your Honor, for letting me ask that.
No, that was a good question.
One additional, so to change uses would be a resolution to change a revenue purpose statement. So there's kind of 2 things that you could change in the future within that.
Okay, so you can go 2 directions.
I got a clarification. What's the objective of this committee? What are the specific decisions being made or brought back for the rest of the council to discuss before a green is given? Because I guess I asked that question for, if we say what percentage and you say streets is the main purpose, there's only 2 million incremental essentially when you're talking about an $8 million number. So if streets is the answer or whatever else, some things seem pretty straightforward if people are of the mind that we have more gaps to fill than we have budget to do with. So I guess I just want to understand what the specific objective, what recommendations are coming out of that committee.
From what limited information I picked up here today, I would assume it would be to come back with 2 major answers. One would be, are we going forward recommending a franchise fee and at what level? And the second would be, assuming the committee's willing to take on that second part, how do we best let the public know how dire the straits are if we don't do something, and get the people to get out and vote?
And also I would add to that some comparable information about what other cities have gone to referendum and failed. And also you had used the word marketing, but I really would like to see some stronger priorities and begin to organize ourselves around what the actual costs of doing needed and necessary repairs are, because I really want to understand better the true burden on our community.
Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
So Gabe, did I hear you right? And like I said, I was late, just like Barry and I were both late coming in. The total dollar number is $2 million, is what, at a 5% rate?
If we go back to slide 3 or 4. Yeah, $500,000 per percentage, but again, don't let that fool you. It's gross in that way she described it, which is not an accurate way to describe it. So it's really 5 million after the first percentage. So you're 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it's 500 times 4.
Yeah, the first percentage is just a wash.
If I may.
You may.
I think the committee ought to come back, their responsibilities should be twofold. Number one, define the projects or the direction that the money is going. Okay, whether it's, some of it goes to safety and streets or whatever they do, and then what that correlates into for the recommended franchise fee amount, so that it corresponds together with what we've been talking about here today. I think so. This is the projects that need to be going forward. That corresponds with this amount for the franchise fee. So then we can take it out from there.
And am I right, that's the revenue purpose statement? Is that the right?
That's correct. That would
Yeah.
essentially be coming back with a revenue purpose statement that would say what things are to be used for
Yep.
and a percent.
I ask a question.
You may.
Is this just a council resolution adoption, or is this an election to the taxpayers?
So the council can decide that you want to take this to a special election. That's your option to do. And then there is the ability of the public to collect signatures on a petition to move it to an election. And so it could go both ways. For adoption, it is really looking at if neither of those things happen, it's ordinances to basically amend our existing alliant ordinances, as well as establishing a new ordinance for consumers' energy and getting an agreement there, and then holding a public hearing on the revenue purpose statement, as well as the public hearings you would do on the ordinances as well.
I liked your question, Noel, and maybe we could task the committee with coming up with what the real options are and what they would recommend in the order of doing them. I was fuzzy on that too, wondered what percentage it took to get what kind of a vote, whether it was up here or out in the public, and when an election might be. Those are details that would be helpful to have coming back to the council.
They're on the slides.
I went past that one.
So to just go through that again, the next date for a special election would be March 7th of 2023. And so I did consult with Lynch Dallas because Iowa code seemed very unclear, as well as the code related to specifically the franchise fees, about how that would work in terms of when someone would have to petition. And so it went back to the county auditor, and they came up with a timeline of absolutely when they would need everything in their office for a special election, and that drop dead date is January 20th. And so looking at a reasonable date for how long it would take the city attorney to craft the ballot language, which would effectively be the ordinance, that we figured would be a week. And so January 13th is a Friday. So we would be looking at close of business on that Friday for the drop dead date for any petitions to be filed.
If there aren't any other questions preliminarily, let me entertain a motion that we ask the mayor to proceed with the appointment of a 3-person committee to handle the things that have been discussed. And then if there's a second, we'll have further discussion.
So move.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion before we call the roll? Roll call.
Oop. Isom.
No.
Kell, I believe, is absent. Lottiehoff.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Okay, that carried. Staff and mayor have their direction. And I think that's the only thing on the agenda, so thank you, Susan Parker, for coming and leading the discussion. Thank to the staff people for giving us a good picture of what's going on in each department, and we are adjourned at 3:05 p.m.